May curiosity lead our way. Enjoy. We're good?
We're good.
We're good. Well, Shanna, thanks for sitting down with me.
My pleasure. We've been talking about this for months now, so it's actually
Yeah, it has been months, I think.
Kind of awesome to have it come to fruition.
Yeah, in a new space.
Yep. Yeah, magical space. Very happy to be in this place right now and to have you here.
I'm grateful to be here.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of start things off, one thing I usually ask everybody is, how would you describe yourself to a room full of people who don't know you?
This question always gets me, how to answer that. I am everything and nothing.
Right.
Yeah, I find that hard to answer because I feel like I'm constantly changing. But at the essence, I feel like I am someone who is just constantly seeking to experience life and from a place of love and just seeking to understand myself. And yeah.
Sort of, well, and to bring it back to my tagline for the whole podcast is make curiosity lead our way.
Right.
And so what I'm hearing in that is sort of a curiosity into self. Like, what does that look like? Who is that now? And then who does that evolve into being? That kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of evolution along the way, but I would describe myself as somebody who is connected to her heart and has given herself the freedom to follow the pulse of intuition and to follow my heart and just trust in the process and see where it takes me. And when I have done that in my life and allowed that to be my guide, it's been a wild, magical ride. So that's what I've committed myself to, being that type of person that allows herself to do that.
Has that come naturally to you?
No. I used to be somebody who was deathly afraid to make a decision. I used to beg other people to make decisions for me. That was this narrative that ran through my head, was like, I don't know what to do. I can't make a decision. Like, please help me. Please show me the way. And always looking externally for that. Never giving myself the credit or the understanding that I have the power to do that for myself and to be that guide and that beacon for myself.
What was the catalyst to make that shift? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. I think it's just a progression of things, a series of things. I'm starting to what's coming up for me right now is going into construction and being surrounded by men and really having to stand in my power and almost like defend myself in why I deserve to be in that space. And I think that led me down this path of like, this is what I need to do. I feel like it was from like a very wounded space of like proving myself. And I think in that desire to prove myself, I then started to make decisions. But I think it came from an unhealed, like unhealthy place that sent me down this whole other path that was kind of like off of my soul's path, but then brought me back to my soul's path.
Which in turn could have been your soul's path.
Exactly. Exactly. That's it. It's like,
it's the hero's journey of, we need to leave our home to explore and experience, and then oftentimes find ourselves back at home, whether that's in where we started or a new home. But
right. I had this yoga teacher when I was living in Mexico, and he used to say, I mean, he would laugh at, like, I remember showing up with a broken collarbone to say goodbye to him, to tell him I was moving back to Canada to have surgery. And he laughed at me in like a loving way, but he was just like, haha, like, make some popcorn and go watch the movie of your life, because not even the flap, like nothing isn't preordained. Like everything is preordained down to the flap of a butterfly's wing. And he used to say that all the time. And it's interesting looking back on everything that's happened and how all of those things, no matter how joyous or devastating, how they all played a part in bringing me to where I am.
In thinking of that, Could you talk a little bit about the path that's led you to where you are today? You mentioned construction, being in Mexico. There's some pieces there.
Yeah. That's brought me to like this moment sitting right here with you on this couch right now.
Sure.
So, when I was 14, I started working with my dad, and my dad is a contractor. And I feel like we had a very close relationship, and I feel like there was a part of me that wanted to prove myself in that space. So that sent me down the path of construction. So I started my own business in 2013, but previous to that, I'd worked in about 4 other companies, and with each of those companies, it was like I was the only female walking in. And I look back on that now, realizing that I was surrounding myself with men in an effort to, I think, try to unconsciously heal something within myself, but in an effort to allow men, or in hopes for men to see me as one of them so that they wouldn't want to hurt me, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I operated from this like hyper wounded masculine space for a very long time, very hyper independent. I would argue that I was single for a really long time, but I was always seeking validation externally in one way or another. And I always was looking for something outside of myself. Like I constantly felt like something was missing, and I was searching for it, and I just felt lost and like I couldn't find it. So I looked really hard for it there. And then when I was 19, I found hot yoga. And I instantly fell in love with that. I practiced that every single day. And then I took myself to Nicaragua to do my yoga teacher training. And I started teaching when I was 21. And so I've been teaching ever since. So yeah, yoga and construction. And then from there, I feel like yoga was my savior. I was still doing a lot of unhealthy things like drinking all the time. And I mean, I can remember being hungover, teaching a yoga class, like so hungover that I was like crouched down in the back corner, like holding my head in my hand, probably reeking like vodka, teaching a yoga class. But I feel like that kept me, I almost want to say alive. It kept me from going even more down a devastating path, because I was disassociating, numbing out, and disconnecting so badly that had I not had that, I don't know what would have happened. And then from there, so I was still just, constantly like working 7 days a week, teaching 8 yoga classes a week, just burnt out to the max. And then I started to go to the gym. So I found the gym, loved that, started working out a lot, found a coach I just wanted to get in really good shape. So I hired a coach, and he was incredible. And he suggested that I start bodybuilding. He was like, you should do a show. Like you could really do well. And I started training for fitness shows, and I'd get up at like 5 a.m. and go to the gym to do like an hour of fasted cardio and just listen to motivational videos, and go work a 12-hour day, and then go to the gym, lift weights for 2 hours at night, and then do the same thing over and over again. But he instilled in me a level of belief and confidence that I had never experienced before. And he was like, I feel like you can win this show. And that was my first experience with like visualization. And I won that show, and I hadn't even considered that I would be able to win it until he put that idea in my head. But in winning that show, it sent me down this other path of feeling like I'd found my calling, but I'd put all of my sense of self-worth and how I looked. And I'd realized I'd been doing that for years. And it was in that experience that I realized like I was in the best shape of my life and I still was like deeply unhappy and something was still missing and I still couldn't figure out what that was. Um, and that started to trigger like emotional eating and things like that. And then my relationship at that time began to fall apart. And I decided that I wanted to sell my house and I ended my relationship and that I was going to move out to BC at that point. So this is early 30s. I think I was 32 at this time. So it's like 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I had sold the house and I was getting ready to move. And then COVID, well, actually, just before COVID, my doctor found a lump on my thyroid that was abnormal. And I had to wait to move because I had to have surgery to remove that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting. And then COVID hit.
You had the surgery before COVID?
No,
Okay.
she found the lump just before COVID. I had a biopsy. They weren't sure if it was cancerous or not, and they deemed it abnormal.
Right.
But because of COVID, I had to wait to have surgery. And they removed that in June. And it was successful in that it hadn't spread anywhere and they were able to get all of it out. And very minimal chance of regrowth. And so that kind of, I mean, that scared the shit out of me for sure. And I just felt like that was a really potent moment of me like realizing like, because obviously that your throat, like your throat, if you look at, the chakras and you tie that to yoga, it's all about self-expression and speaking your truth. And yeah, I just felt like this like silencing of who I really am and my self-expression. And then yeah, I took off after that surgery. I moved to BC. I spent a couple months in BC and then I had this nudge to go to Mexico. And I went to Mexico for what was supposed to be a month. And then that's when they started shutting down flights to come back to Canada. And everyone was calling me in fear, telling me that I needed to move home. And I was like, no, this feels very much like the opposite of that. I'm going to be staying.
Mm-hmm.
And ended up staying for 6 months and meeting some other like really incredible people. And one woman in particular, who I'm still really close friends with. And in that relationship was where I started to do some like really deep healing work and where a lot of repressed memories started to come back to me. And yeah, so I just spent almost 2 years in Mexico. And then what brought me home was my lifelong best friend passed away. So I came home for that, for her funeral. And then when I went back to Mexico, I was with my friends and we had done ayahuasca a couple nights before that. And we were sitting down talking about our experiences. And I was like, I really feel like it's time for me to go home, but I just don't know when. And then the very next morning I got in a moto accident, broke my collarbone and had to come home and have surgery. So moved home, ended up staying with my grandparents for a while. And I would come to Huron County to visit her parents and her family and her kids almost once a month. And then ultimately my heart knew I needed to be here. So that's what led me here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And here we are. Yeah. Now, thinking about finding your voice, your friend you met in Mexico, would you say that she kind of helped you through that process? Because it seems interestingly timed. You have your surgery, they find this lump, everything's kind of cleared. You come to Mexico, you meet this woman, and then there's a stage of evolution, it sounds like. It seems like she was probably like an integral part in that process at that time. Is that
1000%? Yeah. Hannah was a huge catalyst for my growth. And we're still very close today. And I'm so grateful for her existence. And we are just, the connection that her and I have is just next level, like visions about each other, like telepathy, like just all kinds of interesting things. Like, but she believed me when I didn't believe myself. Like, she helped instill that belief in me, whereas like I'd been gaslit my entire life and manipulated my entire life to the point where I didn't even know what was true and what was real. And she reminded me that what I feel is real. What I know to be true is actually true, and that I need to believe myself. And that was huge. And Hannah's just such a gift, and she's an incredible woman who does brilliant work. And I highly recommend to anyone wanting to do any healing work to reach out to her.
Sure.
But yeah, I had a vision 3 months before Brianna died. I had a vision, and I called Hannah and I told her this 3 months prior. And I said, I just had a vision that my mom's going to call me and she's going to tell me something devastating, and you're in front of me, and I collapse into your arms. And Hannah and I were leading a yoga retreat in Mexico. I had just finished teaching a 2-hour workshop on how to integrate pleasure and joy into your nervous system to cultivate a felt sense of safety in your body so that you have a baseline of calm and presence to be able to handle the devastating things that life throws at you. And as soon as that workshop ended, my phone rang and I answered it, and my mom's there and she says, "Where's Hannah?" And and I'm like, "She's right in front of me." And my mom told me that Brianna died, and I collapsed into Hannah's arms. Mm-hmm. And in that moment as well, because when I was 16, one of my other really dear close friends passed away in a car accident. Her and her mom both were killed. They drove into the path of a train. Her mom was blinded by the sun and drove into the path of a train. And her name was Maria. And I didn't deal with that for 16 years. I buried that deep down inside of my body. I put it in a drawer. I shut that drawer and I locked it. And I did not look at that for 16 years. And I started to do some work around it a couple years prior to Bree passing. And in that moment where my mom told me that Brianna had died and I fell into Hannah grabbed me by the shoulders. I don't even think I had told her about Maria. She grabbed me by the shoulders and said to me, "Shanna, Maria is here right now, and she wants me to tell you that you can't do with this what you did with her. You have to deal with this. You have to stay present with this." And I remember just like, it like woke me up. It like kind of like shocked me back into my body because I had totally just.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's powerful to have 16 years sort of unfold in the moment. Especially if you'd never mentioned it to her. That's.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine how to even process that in real time.
Right.
Yeah.
A few things have happened like that with her. Like something else I'd never told her before came through and she like spoke it out loud to a group of women. And I was like, oh, that was for me.
Right. And
that's what set off a whole other journey of healing for me as well.
It's interesting. I think the theme of belief has come up, that your coach, you said, instilled a sense of belief in you that you never experienced before. And then you did end up winning the show. And Hannah's reiterated that in a different sort of avenue of life. And now, like, I definitely see that in you, in yourself now. But it's interesting to hear the backstory to, there's been people that have been in place in a sort of chronological way almost. If we're going to get you confident in your body and take that external validation, bring that internally. And now that we're internal, we met this woman who is now like, I see this in you, and then distilling it in you as well. Now that we're in here, we're gonna dig into it. And now here we are.
And now it's in me, and now I embody that. And it's just like,
yeah,
it's just part of who I am now.
And you're teaching it.
And I'm teaching it.
Yeah. Well, so that, as I mentioned before, sometimes it works out really well asking questions. You deal a lot with creating safety.
Yeah.
do you have any sort of like, in terms of teaching that, you have a course you're creating right now, you're bringing that out.
Yeah.
But like, how did you piece that together previously? Because as in creating things myself over the years, it's kind of like this broken process of you have these ideas and then they disappear and then they come back. It's like, oh, that's what that was for.
Yeah.
Right. So do you remember, are there moments where you're like, oh, this is definitely for, part one or whatever it might have been. But like, have you drawn back from this cultivating safety and teaching it now, like sort of created a linear path back to the moments of the events in your life as well?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this goes back to right after winning that show and doing those shows and then kind of spiraling afterwards. Um, when you're in that type of shape and you start to gain a little bit of weight back, it can be really difficult. A lot of body dysmorphia kicks in. And I started to experience bouts of bulimia, which I had encountered when I was a teenager as well. So that led me to like really start to take action towards getting support in my life. So I hired a one-on-one coach who I had happened to go to high school with. And she was really incredible as well. And in that first call with her, and I'd just broken up with my boyfriend at the time, that was a very unhealthy relationship. Definitely a trauma bond, but I would say it was a very successful relationship in that it was the catalyst for the revelation that like I did not know how to love myself. And if I don't know how to love myself, how can I expect this person to know how to love me? And so in starting to work with her in our first call, she just said to me, like, it really sounds like you don't know how to love yourself. And I broke down crying. So in working with her was a really beautiful experience because we did that, in those moments where you're having these feelings and these triggers and these beliefs about yourself that come through in experience and in relationship, and you're able that you have somebody who can reflect that back to you in real time and help you to like rewire that thought process in your brain, was super effective. And the more I did that, the more I switched these belief systems about myself, and the more I understood that I had this abusive, toxic relationship inside of myself where I had basically turned against myself. And, I was doing all these things to take care of my body and like eating well and going to hot yoga and going to the gym. But like, what was the intention behind that? And it was like really diving deep into why I was doing what I was doing and what I was feeling and how I was like recreating these core emotions that I had adopted from childhood that weren't serving me. Was where I really realized at the same time as I'm learning how to love myself, she was into pleasure practice. And she got me a jade egg as part of our coaching package and was like teaching me how to do practices with that. So that was creating this connection to my body and to my creativity and to my sexual energy and my like life force energy, and like literally learning how to love myself in that sense, like in an intimate way. And the more I practiced that was the more I began to notice that like my anxiety was just like non-existent. Like things that used to give me anxiety, I would kind of like wait for like that all familiar feeling of like my stomach to start to like, feel like it was being compressed by two hands, or that like fluttering in my chest. And it just like stopped happening. And I realized that what I was actually doing in doing these pleasure practices was creating this safety in my nervous system. And I'd never experienced that before. And the more I did that was the deeper I was able to go into the work that I was doing with myself. And then the more safety I created, and and this happened around the time in Mexico, was the more that these things started to be revealed to me, and I started to like remember, scenarios that went all the way back to when I was really little, and having these memories resurfaced of being sexually abused, and then how that followed in different scenarios, and like, in my teenage years, and then into my relationships, like those abusive patterns. So that is like, I started out by teaching pleasure work to women as a means to gain confidence in their bodies and to learn how to love themselves. And I didn't really realize what I was doing for myself at that time.
Right.
And I realized like what I was really doing was healing my own sexual trauma.
Yeah, that rewiring you mentioned earlier, kind of, well, teaching yourself it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And understanding like where all of that came from, like the bouts of depression and this feeling of unworthiness and not enoughness, and how that was manifesting and showing up in my life, and never understanding why. Like, I don't understand. I don't get it. Like,
right.
Like, why is this happening? Like, when you don't know any different, it's hard to know different.
Yep.
But eventually it was like I was living life in black and white, and then all of a sudden it was like,
yeah, the lights are on.
Full color, and like, holy shit, life is beautiful.
It's interesting too, on your story today, I thought about this on the way over here. You talk about developing a felt sense of safety in your body, and you teach, yourself and others how to do that. And I kind of reflected back to myself, and that I don't know that I would say I've almost ever felt safe in my body, and that it's always been kind of this uncertain thing, right? It's like there's going to be some health stuff, right? There's going to be tubes and places and needles and surgeries and whatever. And so I guess I'm curious on your thoughts on, because my mind went straight to developing a sense of confidence, or like a knowing in my ability to navigate whatever it is, because the unknown is so surely unsure, and I need to be able to deal with that. And so can I then feel safe, or at least feel confident that I can deal with it if it comes? And like the answer is yes, but I don't know that I would say I feel safe in my body even now, right? There's just ongoing things that's been a part of my life. And so I don't know, I guess I'm more just thoughts that came up in listening to your story today, but then in like, yeah, where does that go with you? What are your thoughts on that? I don't know how it would play out.
Well, I feel like also you and I mean, we've had the joy of having a lot of conversations already.
Yeah.
And in that, and it's interesting that you say that, because in you, and I've expressed this to you, where you feel like a very safe place and you exude that. And I think what you're saying, like speaking to that, there's a level of trust. So yes, it's cultivating safety. And to me, it feels like cultivating safety is the ability to feel safe in your body. And in order to feel safe in your body is to have the knowledge to self-regulate. So that no matter like what is happening, you're able to access some sort of trust in yourself, or to know what tool to reach for to be like, okay, this, like, I have to bring myself back now.
Yeah.
Whereas like I see you as this, and I've said this to you before about like how you're like this like lightning rod that's like grounded in the sand in the middle of a fucking shitstorm.
Sure.
But I feel like with you, you've been told how many times now that you're going to die? And
yeah, a few.
And you've instilled in this level of belief in yourself of like, it doesn't matter what anybody says to me. Like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to survive. And I think that's brought you to a place of like, you just trust, like you're just so deep into trust, because like, what other option do you have when everyone around you is, say, like panicking or saying like,
this is bad.
This is bad. Like, you're not going to make it through the night.
Yeah.
And in the morning you open your eyes and you're like, holy fuck, I made it through the night.
Yeah.
Like anybody, like come and tell me that I can't do something. Like,
right.
Please come and tell me I can't do something.
Yeah.
Because so to your point, I don't know if I was digressing there a little bit, but I think to the point of that is like, in that is just creating this like deep sense of trust and connectedness within yourself and awareness that like things are going to rock you.
Yeah.
But that like you become almost unfuckable with in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's to your point about, or what you mentioned about waking up in the morning and stuff. And I find I've said it a lot of times in my life, like if my eyes open, I'm good. It doesn't matter what I wake up to. I woke up to a lot of wild shit. Like, oh wow, didn't see that coming, you know? But it's always just in my everything. There's never been a doubt. Like if these open up and I'm aware enough to know that I'm alive, I got it. And I don't know, it's just there. Always has been. Yeah. And it's whereas everyone else, even in my own family, like not my parents maybe so much, but my siblings are very different in that they're much more like, I don't know, maybe a more anxious feeling. Whereas if I have something crazy going on, I'm like, well, I might as well go to bed. And if I wake up in the morning, we'll see what, like, that's the curiosity thing. Make curiosity leave our way.
Right.
Like, I have no idea what I'm going to wake up to, but I do know if I'm awake all night, it's going to be worse. That has been proven to me many, many times. Right. So like, what's the best thing to do right now? Go to bed. So let's go to sleep. Whereas a lot of people are like, I don't want to go to sleep. What if I don't wake up? Like, I mean, you're going to have a lot more rough night if you just stay awake and you don't wake up. Like, I'd rather just go to sleep.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just an interesting, like, coming from a different angle.
Maybe. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, in that it's like you've created this baseline in your body, like in your nervous system, you've created that baseline for that. So that no matter what's happening around you or what's going on, you're just like so connected to your heart and to that inner knowing that like no matter what happens, like whether I've got this either way, no matter what happens. Right. And you're so anchored in that like that's your baseline, like that's your safety.
Sure.
Where some people their baseline of safety is pure fucking chaos.
Absolutely.
And they just constantly seek out experiences and situations in their life that are just going to recreate that over and over and over again because they don't know any different. I did this solo trip to Bali when I was 24, and this yoga teacher, I remember this as clear as day, and I love it so much, and I say it all the time, but she said, I am grateful to have woken up this morning. I have been given a precious human life, and I will not waste it. And that really hits hard because, I mean, everyone's going through so much, like everyone's got their shit. But it's just this sense of gratitude that you just can't beat. It's like, yeah, I woke up this morning and everything else can feel really heavy and massive. And it can feel that way. Yeah. But like waking up every morning and opening your eyes, like what a gift.
Yeah. And that in itself, like, it's interesting that it's not the default. Like my default would be the fact that we woke up in the morning is enough to know that whatever the day brings, we can handle. Mm-hmm. Whereas like the default seems to be the opposite. And I just think, but it doesn't make any sense. Right. And so obviously it's not that simple, but for me, it's like, I don't know. Why wouldn't you do that? But then the reasons are like childhood experiences and life experiences and fear and trauma and all these things. And like, those are a lot of those things I can't relate to. And I have a hard time. Like, I don't know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. And yet it's like, I can't imagine what that experience is like day to day. This mine is just so different. Like, this is crazy. Right. And like, here we go versus like, this is crazy and I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. Right. Like, I just have a hard time. Like, I don't know what that's like so much. Right. Not that I always know what to do, but you know, it's like one thing at a time. We zoom in and what's next and what's next and what's next. And then eventually you can zoom back out and sort of see the forest as well. But sometimes you just got to look at your feet. Like, okay. But that ability to like, where are we looking right now? I'm going to point my focus either on the big picture or the very small picture And like down to the fact of like sometimes you can't get up to go to the bathroom. So like that's
Right.
a good goal for the day. Right.
Right.
Whereas some people are like, I don't know if I'm going to go to work and do all these 20,000 things. Like, well, sometimes you can't even get up. So
right.
there's that. So like, how about that's a great day, but not everybody has that experience. And so it's like, you don't know what you don't know. And so you can't imagine what that's like either, because it can be kind of heavy. You can't get out of bed,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know what that's like from a state of depression, but I don't know
Sure.
what that's like from like a
Sure.
literal can't move. Yeah.
I don't know. When I'm the opposite, I guess. I can't say. Yeah. I guess it's one of my not qualms with depression, but I just don't know how to even process the sensation of I can't get out of bed when your body's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't. There's
Well,
more consequence if I don't get out of bed and my body's okay, because it just gets worse.
right. But in even saying that too, though, like your body's not okay.
Mm,
Um, and I think that's the other thing too about like mental health is that there's this
sure.
whole idea of like if I threw my back out and couldn't walk, there would be people coming over to walk my dog and to, you know,
Yep.
bring me food. But if I was like, I'm depressed and a lot of people don't really understand that. And they're like, okay, well, just get over it.
Right.
Or, you know, I believe, or it's like, mental, like you have mental issues, you have mental problems. But to me, it's like anyone suffering from anxiety or depression has experienced something in their life
Sure.
that is the root of that. And it's trauma, And then from that experience of what they've experienced, their nervous system has then taken on this state of survival mode that it doesn't know how to get out of
Yeah.
because we're not taught how to self-regulate in a mainstream way. I mean, it's becoming more and more loud now, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was very taboo, mental health issues. It was very much like a sweep it under the rug and not pay attention to it type thing. Whereas like when your body is in survival mode, like I was walking around in a trauma response for 30 years and didn't know it.
Sure.
That does like devastating things to your physical health.
Sure.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of the time, even still, it comes from a place of judgment with people, like in terms of depression or mental health problems or even issues at all,
Yeah.
instead of like that openness or like, I don't understand what's happening right now, and maybe you don't have the capacity to help me understand, but like, I just feel kind of maybe, well, lost comes up for conversation the other day, but like, I don't really know what to do right now because I can't relate to that. And so I don't want to make it worse, but I also don't want you to feel alone in that. So, like, I'm
Right.
here if you need me, and I understand that maybe you can't even tell me that you need me,
Right.
right? And so then what do we do? It's like I don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
Especially if especially if you tend to suffer in silence and
sure.
you don't know how to ask for help.
Yeah. Well, and oftentimes people reject the help, right? If you're not in a space to accept it, you can have an intense reaction to someone trying to help, even if it's well intended and like properly placed. If
Yeah.
you're not in a place to accept it, you can have it can be aggressive, like the response is not pleasant.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think too, largely people, like, what comes up in my mind is when you lean on people, they leave. And so a lot of the time that's tested. It's like, oh, well, I'll see if you're going to leave right now because I'm going to tell you to in a lot of ways. And it's like, oh yeah, see there you left.
Right.
Versus like, I see you trying to push me away. I'm going to give you space, and then I'm going to come back and check in. Right? It's
Mm.
like, I don't know what to do right now, and I'm still here. So like the resistance isn't intimidating. I just don't know how to get through that or how to communicate and create that bridge. So I don't think a lot of people have experience in people not just leaving.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is too much for me
Right.
because a lot of people are emotionally disconnected and don't have that intelligence to again, like just tools that we're not taught, like we should be taught in schools, like
Sure.
how to have healthy relationships, how to emotionally regulate, how to regulate your nervous system. Like we're just not taught how to do these things. But when we're disconnected, we benefit the the higher
other,
uppers,
absolutely. The lizard people, so to speak, as they say.
Yeah. And then just like this deep-seated conditioning that being vulnerable is a weakness.
Sure.
That asking for help is a weakness. It's not. Like we need each other. We're built for connection.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma rewires us for protection. And then we protect, we deflect, and then we project.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just being like, oh shit, this is what I'm feeling right now. Why am I feeling this way? I need to own this, and taking a minute to reflect and then maybe understand like the way I'm reacting or the way I want to react is not reflective of what's actually happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
What is this really about? And can I give myself a little bit of space to lean into that? And can I ask that other person for a little bit of space? Be like, I just need to take a minute so I can respond in a way that's not going to then push said person away.
Yeah.
But that's difficult to do. It's difficult to catch yourself. Like it takes practice to catch yourself in those things too.
Really well said, by the way. Those are a lot of very similar words.
Right.
You placed them all impressively great.
Thank you.
So, tip of the hat.
Thank you. Yeah, tip of the cap to you.
Yeah, no problem. Sir. Well, they did. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to just take a dive into the death question because I never have a transition. So I'm just going to go there now, and that'll pull that thread. And so I'm curious, how would you describe your relationship to death?
My relationship to death has evolved drastically, especially over the last 3 years. My whole body's tingling right now. I used to be so terrified of death. Like my relationship with death was just full of fear. I had a lot of moments when I was younger where I would just cry myself to sleep thinking I was going to die. Mm-hmm. I feel like that was tied to a lot of other traumatic things that were happening to me at night.
Sure.
I don't know if we want to preface this with perhaps a trigger warning, because this is going to take me down a road that's going to talk about depression and suicide, if that's okay.
If you're comfortable.
Sure. So there's been a lot of inquiry for me down that path because of what I experienced in losing Bree and in the fact that she did take her life. And back in 2011, I was doing my yoga teacher training and I had another premonition. I had another vision. And this happened a lot with her and I. Like both of her children, I knew she was pregnant before she even told me. Like I had a dream about the one and then I just had a feeling about the other. And I was like, are you pregnant? And she was like, not that I know of. And then 2 weeks later, she was like, what the fuck? You're psychic. I was pregnant. I've been 4 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
But when I was in Nicaragua doing my yoga teacher training, I had this dream. And in this dream, she called me and said to me, I'm going to call you when you get home. And I'm not going to be okay, but I'm going to tell you that I'm okay, but I'm not. Mm-hmm. And I need you to come. Like, I need you to come and save me. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I was in this like little hut, this eco lodge on the beaches of Nicaragua. We had no electricity. We had no phones and nothing. And I remember like stumbling out onto the porch, not stumbling, but I was kind of asleep, but going out onto the porch and standing on and like feeling the breeze on my face and listening to the waves roll in and just like looking up at the sky and being like, okay, like feeling just a sensation of like, that wasn't just a dream. Mm-hmm. And then 2 days after coming home, she called me in the middle of the night, and she was beside herself and was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be here. Everything's falling apart. I just want to die. And we talked. I told her I loved her. I offered to drive to Toronto. I was in Barrie at the time. And at the end of that conversation, she just said to me, like, thank you so much for answering the phone. I feel so much better now. I'm okay. I'm just going to go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And she hung up the phone, and my whole body went numb. And I remembered that dream, and I called her and she didn't answer. And I got in my car and I started driving, and I called 911. And by the time I'd gotten to her apartment, the ambulance was taking her to the hospital because she had attempted to take her life. And I remember walking into the hospital room and looking at her, and she was like in the corner, just like shaking. And I went over and just held her. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what does that feel like to not want to live? And since then, and since like all the things that have happened previous to her actually leaving us, I experienced things in my life where it wasn't like I wanted to die, but I didn't know how I was going to live feeling the way that I felt.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this Arabic saying, and it's something like, you say that you want to die, like throw yourself in the ocean and watch as you fight to survive.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to kill yourself. You want to kill something inside of you. And I can understand how that feeling, if it lives inside of you long enough,
Right.
how that would lead to that. And when I got the news that she had taken her life, I spiraled into depression. I feel like I was trying to connect to her in that place. And a month and a half after she passed, I did ayahuasca. And I literally had this experience where I was taken back to the day of her funeral, and I was standing over her, looking down on her in the casket. And in an instant, we had switched places. Like I was in the casket and she was looking down at me. And I realized that like a part of me died with her, but a part of her still lives with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like had this, and then like after having that experience, I then like went up to death. And like, it was like I shook hands with death. It was like this fear of death that was then like eradicated. And then of course there was all kinds of emotions to work through after that, like the anger and the sadness and the grief, which like still hits so hard. Like even yesterday, just,
Yep.
But I feel like there's this understanding of the impermanence of life, and that once you can conquer that fear of dying, you can live so much more. And like, what is death really? Because since Bree's passed away, like, I mean, I don't know. And since she's passed away, I've had so many experiences where I've gotten to connect with her, and like so many signs, and like I've done work with so many different women where it's like she comes through all the time, and it's just the physical expression of her life is over, but my relationship to her still exists. It's just taken on a different form.
Sure.
But when I say like, what is death really? I feel like we die 1,000 times in our lives.
Yep.
And it's like, until you know what that is and accept that that's going to keep happening, and allow the versions of yourself to die, like you're never really going to know what it feels like to live. But I feel like back to the whole, like, you don't want to die. There's a part of you that wants to die. Like, there's like this feeling. So, like, what is that feeling that makes you not want to live? And what are you tolerating in your life that is just constantly recreating that feeling? And like, what needs to change? Because anxiety is just like our body's car alarm that goes off when we're tolerating something that is intolerable to our existence and to our, it's like devastating to our systems, but we keep tolerating it because of, say core emotions that we're programmed to feel, or the idea of unworthiness and not being enough, and just these creating these situations in our life that are constantly reinforcing these negative belief systems. That's going to make us feel these things over and over and over and over and over again. That's going to lead us down this path of like not wanting to be alive anymore.
Mm.
So like, what is that? And how can you shift that? I feel like I just like way digressed but I don't know. That's just where it led me, and that's where
Yeah,
we're at.
that's where we're at. No, it's interesting thought. Like,
Yeah.
what does anything come to mind when you think about like how do we shift that? Like the safety thing comes up in my mind, but
So safety, um, awareness,
yeah.
self-compassion,
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge one, especially if there's this like turning against yourself that happens that can happen at a very young age,
Yeah.
where you begin to turn against yourself, especially if things are happening when you're still in the developmental phases of your growth, because then you're going to make everything bad that happens is going to be because of something that you did.
Yeah.
And then you're going to carry this belief with you through the rest of your life that you don't deserve to be loved, that you are not a good person, that your needs don't deserve to be met. And you're going to constantly recreate situations that are going to keep reinforcing that belief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the ironic thing about self-compassion is the people that need it the most are the ones that have the most difficult time letting it in.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like that's why this type of work is so important, especially if you're feeling in that place of not enoughness and unworthiness, and like something is missing and like you're lost, but it's trying to piece it together and constantly looking outside of yourself for an answer. Um, it's like pausing and knowing that it starts with you and it starts within.
Yeah. The answers are all at their fingertips. We just have to look at them instead of
Yeah.
looking everywhere. Well, that's even sort of this perpetual state of busyness in the world. It's like it can be uncomfortable to sit with yourself by yourself as yourself, because then you might see who you are.
Right.
Right. And so what's that like? And
Mm.
sometimes if you don't like what you see, then what do you do about that? Well, then you take accountability and think, okay, well, what can I do to sort of move in a direction that I might be more inclined to feel positively about? Right. But you have to identify those steps, and that takes energy and effort. So, like, there's this underlying, I use this analogy a lot. If everyone's like has a full cup, you're like 99% full. The thought of going to 102% is overwhelming. So, like, but the fact that you go to 102% will bring you back down to like 50. Right.
Right.
Once you overflow, you create space. But when you're at that point of, it's a different analogy, it's a grip. When you're almost slipping out of something, right? When you're gripping on, you can feel your hands start to go. There's nothing you can do to keep them from opening. Right. But the reality of it is, as soon as you open them, you can close them again.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. So teaching yourself, like, is the goal to grip something, or is your goal to trust your hands? And that's something where it's like, you just let it go, and then you're still in control, right? But you can't fight that feeling because it just gets worse. You get that compression in your stomach, the butterflies, all that anxiety gets worse and worse and worse. It amplifies until it opens anyway.
Right.
So it's like, if we can just take that step, be in that discomfort for some amount of time, however long it is, it's going to definitely be less intense than it would be if you fought it for a longer amount of time, right? It continues to get worse,
Right.
right?
Well, and that's that desperation to control everything, right? Like you think you control everything, but you can't.
You can't control anything. No.
You can't. No. And the more you lean into that is the more freedom you will discover.
Right.
But again, that's hard. And it's like back to the staying busy thing. Like busyness is a fear-based reaction and distraction from like what you would actually have to feel if you slowed down and sat with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not an easy thing to do. And there's going to be a lot of things that come up. And, that's why I love breathing practices, because like just noticing what you're feeling, noticing where you're feeling that emotion and just breathing into it does wonders. Journaling.
Yeah.
Writing down your thoughts and your feelings and gaining this perspective on yourself, like being able to look at yourself from the outside in and being like, oh, damn, like that's what I've been doing. And that's why I'm doing it. Right. And it's like, it almost becomes this, like, I don't want to say game, but it just, for me, it's like exciting to just know myself in that way and be like, oh, that's why this has been happening. And it's like all these things just start to click and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then you start to develop this avenue to then create more of what you want in life.
To find those steps.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's definitely easier to escape, or from the perspective of like an instant gratification, moment, like fleeting feeling type of scenario. It's easier to escape a life that you don't love than it is to do the work necessary to build a life that you love and that you don't want to escape from. But it is possible. Like what's on the other side of that deep work it's just fucking incredible.
Yeah. When we've talked about it before with grief too, but when you've experienced the intensity that grief can be, the beauty is also like, you can't even describe it. Like you look at the sunset, you look at the trees right now, you look at the opening your eyes in the morning, all of these things become that much more beautiful when you can, a different side of the coin. It's like, it's the, whatever the saying is, the lower you experience, the higher you're able to experience whatever that is. But it's really is, there seems to be true in that if you continue to stay closed in this sort of monotone space of safety, it's like you've got to go outside the lines here because life just gets so much more beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
And create that expansiveness. And like the more you expand is the more you then like weave in these safeties so that like you're expanding, but you're also creating safety. So then it becomes safer to expand. And like your ability to feel one thing is your ability to feel everything. Like you can't just pick and choose what you're going to be able to feel. So people who have experienced like the depth of grief and loss, just they have qualities that you can't earn any other way than to dive into the devastation and the pain. And in order to reach the heights of joy and pleasure and love, you have to be willing to dive into the depths of your pain and your grief and your devastation.
Absolutely.
And that's what creates the fullness of life, is like all of it. It's all the things, and allowing yourself to experience and feel everything. And then weave in as much joy and pleasure as you can to like keep your head above water for when the waves of.
But you learn what those things are so much easier when you know what they feel like. Like, oh, I'm going to follow that. I'm going to pull that thread. Because like, wow. Right. I didn't know that was there. I didn't know what I didn't know. And now I do. And that's fucking cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to pause for a second and pee.
All right.
So in pulling on that thread of the fullness of life, I'd love to hear about a time that you have felt most alive.
There's so many things jumping out at me. Like yesterday morning, looking out the back door and watching the sun rise over the farmer's field, or, watching the sunset as I'm in the beach, like in the water. Man. Okay. I'm being taken back to a solo trip that I did to Bali, which I referenced earlier. on the island of Gili T, in the middle of an electrical storm, stripping down naked and getting in the ocean. And that was the culmination, like feeling in that moment, but also that entire trip. And I think that that's the result of allowing myself to follow the nudge and do something that, you know, everybody thought that I was crazy at the time, that I wanted to go to Bali by myself, at, you know, 24-year-old single female.
Yeah.
And I only booked my first night and 4 nights at the yoga barn, and just allowed myself to do whatever I felt the pulse to do and go wherever I ended up wanting to go while I was there. And it was just like the moments where I have followed the nudge and trust my intuition and like let my heart lead the way. Those have been the moments where I feel most alive.
Right. Yeah. And even down to the smaller, quote unquote, smaller daily things where, the sunset or the sunrise and the lake.
Yeah. Like
the waves. Yeah.
The magic of walking on the beach.
Yeah.
Like watching the dogs play, you know, watching like all the different colors of the sun, or like, the stars in the sky, like the full moon beaming down, you know.
Absolutely.
Staring at a fire, like just everything now.
That's right. That's right.
But that's the beauty of gratitude, and like in experiencing, you know, grief and loss and losing people that are so close to you and that meant so much to you, is like you see, so there's so much beauty everywhere and in all things, and there's just like this immense gratitude that starts to pour out of you.
And the sense of compassion in general, like self-compassion, compassion to others, because it's like when you don't know what it's like, right? It's like we will never know with anything. I never know. Our experiences through the same circumstances are always going to be different. So your version will be different than my version, and there's never going to be the same. There's, you know, that saying of walk a mile in someone's shoes, right? It's like it doesn't matter if you walk a mile in someone's shoes, because the 10,000 miles they walked before then is what allows them to walk the mile now. And so it's like the idea that, oh, well, if I walk a mile in your shoes, then I'll be able to judge your life. Like there's no.
Well, your feet would probably hurt because my shoes are probably
your shoes, you're a little smaller, you know, but the thinking that like I'll use my health, for example. I know that most people, if you found yourself in a bed and all this craziness, that would be overwhelming. So your experience is not mine, where I'd be like, ooh, this is wild. I just chill, right? I have a sense of peace where it's like a pretty resounding sense of chaos and stress and anxiety is the alternate experience, right? But my 38 years has led me to a place of like, I've been here before, right? So the thinking that anyone has any kind of gauge on what someone else's experiences of anything. That's why I love conversation largely, right? It's like, because it's our ability to try to hear that. Like what does your experience of the moon look like to you, right? Versus to me, where does it take you? These kinds of things would be very different. That's super interesting. Like I never would have thought of that. And that's part of the beauty of human connection.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of brings me back to something that I've been wanting to ask you as well, like on the topic of death and people who are overwhelmed by this feeling of like not wanting to live. As someone who has been told that they're not going to live and who has, you know, fought so many times for their life, have you ever had a moment where you just wanted to like give up and not?
No. It's been, I forget how I worded it in one of the speaking things I did, but like I fought my whole life to stay alive. It's like I am so far invested in that, like everything, every cell in my body. And like I said, if I open my eyes, I'm good. And like the mental, physical, emotional state of that doesn't matter. I've experienced a large spectrum of those as well. right, in my personal life and health and whatever. Like there's a large culmination of a wide breadth of experience has led me to a place of this knowing, despite the maybe more rocky foundation of like, I don't really know. And actually, there's a note on my whiteboard. This is maybe a tangent, but a lot of people expect that they're going to know what it's going to be like, right? Or let's go with the medical thing. Like if you're going to have a procedure on this day, here's what it might be like. You're going to have some drugs. You're going to go home, be sore, blah, blah, blah. You get attached to that story. And then when it doesn't go according to plan, there's another state of trauma. And like, there's all this chaos. It's not happening how I thought it was going to. This isn't supposed to happen, right? There's all these layers of anxiety and craziness, right? Whereas like from day one, I've never had an idea what that looks like because it's all been unknown, right? So I don't expect to know what it's supposed to be like. So I don't have that anxiety of like, this is going not according to plan. Like there wasn't a fucking plan. Like, I don't know what it's supposed to be like. This is wild. That's like where I'm at. So it's like, it's a different angle of, well, like when my parents, like, I can't imagine what it's like to be told your son's going to die.
Right.
And then be like, take him home. Like, what?
Yeah.
You know, it's happened.
Right.
Right. But like, so they don't have like, that's the expectation. Like, he's going to go home and die. See you later. And so what do we do instead? Well, I went fishing and camping and shot archery and, you know, I played metal music and got drunk with my friends and partied. And like, I just live life like normal. It's like, well, what else you going to do? Yeah. Right. And then I keep waking up. It's like, oh, imagine this. I have this life thing today. Let's do that. So I guess that's where my mind goes. Like, I don't have the expectation that I should know what it's going to be like. And so then I don't have the anxiety or the chaotic feeling of this is going differently than the plan. Like, I don't know the plan. And like, that's part of the curiosity. Like, I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, that was going to be the other thing I was going to ask is like, in being the embodiment of no expectation, is there any anxiety there? Ever?
Yeah. Like low level, I would say in the relation, I wouldn't describe myself as having anxiety. I have experienced anxiety and like social anxiety and stuff like that. But even the speaking event I sent you the video for, like my body's shaking. At the start of that, I did a preface. I'm like, because my circulation is weird. And sometimes my legs will give out.
Your circulation is particular.
Yeah. Well, weird. So it's funny. I did an episode where I read the definition of weird. It's actually super fun.
I love weird.
Yeah.
I'm weird as fuck.
So, but in saying that, it's like, I'm fucking shaky right now. My adrenaline's through the roof. And if I end up falling to the floor, give me a minute because I'm probably fine. Just like my body's doing some wild shit versus like, don't call an ambulance, whatever. Like, I'll be good. Just let me get back up and I'll keep going.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I still experience the anxiety in the body. Like, I don't do well with high adrenaline. My body's like sweaty and hot and whatever. I'm like, ooh, this is wild, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But you like, still maintain calm inside of that.
Yeah.
Like you're like, your body's doing some stuff, but like you're like mentally, you're like,
I'm good. Yeah.
You're like calm. You're just like.
Yeah. Well, I learned that in therapy too. We talked about the prefrontal cortex and stuff. And it seems like during a traumatic effect or event, the prefrontal cortex comes offline.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that I have just wired mine to stay on.
Mm-hmm.
And so how about that? But then I'm like, I have all this awareness and stuff. So it's just a different type of trauma then. Well, where does it go? I'm like, I don't know. There's a bunch of it, but
wow.
What do we do with all that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it doesn't feel that heavy. Like, and that's, I don't know. I don't know what to do about it, I guess. I'm not doing anything, I guess. I do the therapy thing. They have the conversations and like EMDR has been really cool.
Yeah, I love EMDR therapy was huge for me. Yeah.
Same. Specifically with grief, few medical things I've gone through with that and like huge shifts in one session even.
Yeah.
So that's been largely the answer. But even at going in and going out, I forget. I failed the test, whatever the test was for. I don't remember what it was for. Anyways, I answered like yes to all the questions. It's like, ooh, you passed in the wrong way. And then after the EMDR thing, I got like 3 out of 20 or whatever. So I was almost cured. She's like,
Oh, wow.
Statistically, we would now say EMDR has cured you. But like walking in and walking out, I felt very similarly. It's just the answers to the questions had changed.
Right.
Right. And then I did a recheck about, was it 6 weeks later, and was still at that baseline. Like, well, that's neat. That was a positive thing.
Are those questions to do with body function, or are they to do with your thought patterns?
It was like symptomatic stuff.
Oh, okay.
Like basically, I think 1 to 5 on, do you have trouble sleeping? Yes or no?
Okay.
Do you, I don't know, there's things about loud noises and things about uncertainty and like kind of a variety of questions on that kind of a spectrum. And if you answered, I think like above 2 or something, you got a certain rating. If you answered above 4 is a different one. And I like was 5 on, I think like 19 out of the 20 or whatever on the first test. And then I handed it over, did a session, and the next session redid it. And I was like 3 or whatever. He's like, oh, so I would say that it has helped. Like,
yeah.
I guess, yeah, I haven't been waking up in the night, and that's nice because life gets really hard when you don't sleep. And
yes, it does.
Yeah, right.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then even that today, like that's at large levels of empathy, people don't sleep well.
Yeah.
And so how do you even go about the world trying to take on all these beautiful things? It's like
when you can't even function.
You can't see them. Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, it's kind of that heaviness of like, oh, I see what's going on, at least on like a one level. So I don't know. I think that's one reason why, like when someone is clearly having an experience in public, like freaking out or yelling or whatever, instead of like, holy fuck, and judging, it's like, ooh, you got some shit going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like that guy in the truck that drove by me the other day, like blaring his horn and giving me the fingers. And I was going, like 5 over the speed limit. And I was just like, yeah, man.
Yeah.
I feel like you're having a bad day. I hope all is well. I mean, I actually say that to him, but as I waved him as he went by. But yeah, you just, you have a different level of understanding and like not letting that be transferred onto you, because especially when people don't know how to handle their big feelings, and their tendency is to then throw it at somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you take that on and then you project, and then you become angry, and then you're throwing that, it's like everyone's just throwing shit at each other. Whereas if we learned how to process that and like transmute it within our own bodies and take responsibility for it, we wouldn't be walking around hurting each other,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just changes. Life feels less stressful when you don't take it on because it's everywhere. It's like the news cycles, right? It's meant to cause stress. Imagine when you watch the news, then you're now stressed. Like that's the whole point.
Right.
That's the point.
That's the point.
And so success, right?
Keep you stressed, keep your immune system down so that you have to buy drugs.
Exactly.
Yeah. Constant state of fear so that you feel disempowered. Yeah, we could go into some conspiracy theory for sure.
Yeah.
But this is why I don't watch the news.
No, exactly.
Or engage in any sort of shit that does that to me.
It's an overarching no thank you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Similar question, different answer, I'm sure. I have these things I like to call movie moments. And I'd love to hear about a time in your life that felt like you were living in a movie.
I feel like I have been living in a movie ever since I became deeply connected to myself and been living with awareness and intention. Like the synchronicities and the things that have been happening in my life, it's just fucking wild. I can't even pinpoint one thing or the other. Like I would have to tell you a massively long story. But I literally feel like my whole life is a movie that I get to create and that I'm curating. And anything that is not going the way that I want it to go is a sign that there is something that I am unconscious to that is asking for my attention to be worked on and processed so that I can then move more towards what my ideal movie of life would be like. I feel like a lot of the things that I've already talked about would be like movie moments for sure.
Absolutely.
Like the premonitions and then yeah. Nothing's jumping out at me in this very moment.
I had a sense we're in a movie right now.
Right? We are.
I mean, a sense that we're actually videotaping, but
right? But the sun's setting.
Right.
Like
Just lights and the Leroy's being cute. It's awesome. So, different type of question. What's been one of the most difficult but important lessons you've learned in life so far?
Like gonna pass out. That, and I mean, this is kind of a conundrum and something that I'm about to say that I feel like more than one thing can be true at the same time.
Sure.
Probably that the people that you expect, or the people that I expected to show up for me and be there for me and to support me and protect me, that couldn't or didn't. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. Mm-hmm. Can you edit this, or does this have to keep going?
I can do it. Yeah.
Okay, two things are coming up for me. And one of them feels true, but also doesn't feel true, because we do need support and we do need love and protection from other people. But one of the most difficult things that I've learned is that the people that I thought would really be there for me weren't. And in that moment, it was very devastating, but it was also a beautiful lesson that led me back to myself and allowed me to source that love and support and protection and sense of responsibility within myself.
Sure.
And the other most difficult thing that I've learned is that in losing two of my closest friends in this life, that like you're going to lose the ones that you love the most, and that you just need to embrace like every moment and just tell people that you love them and hold them and tell people how you feel. Mm-hmm. And like give yourself space to feel what you need to feel, and also like don't live in the devastation, like right. Find ways to bring more joy and love into your life.
Change is guaranteed in life.
Yeah.
It's one of the few.
Yes. And I mean, change excites me. I feel like I've created this existence in which like I'm just constantly allowing change, and it excites me at this point of time where like it used to scare me, but now it's like like bring it on. Like what's next?
So here's the next question. As you look to the coming weeks and months, what are you feeling most excited about?
I get moments where I am so fucking excited and I have no idea why. And I literally am just beaming, and I'll be like, just like, in my truck, like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And I don't even know why, but it's just a feeling. It's like, I know amazing things are coming and I can feel it in my body. And also that I don't know what it is also very exciting.
Sure.
So I think it's just like leaning into this depth of trust that like, no matter what happens, like,
right.
Like bring it on. Like, let's make some popcorn and
I got this.
Watch the fucking movie,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. One last question to kind of wrap things up. Looking at yourself through the eyes of a younger you, what do you see now that lets her know immediately that she is safe?
I'm gonna like make me cry. Oh man, she sees a woman who stood up for her. She sees a woman who called people out on the things that have happened and that have been done. she sees a woman who's strong and confident and who shows up for her and who will always show up for her and will always be there for her.
Mm-hmm.
Always. And there was a time when I was not, where I left her scared and vulnerable in a corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even know I was doing that. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the strength side, I see it in you in the gym all the time. Right on those last reps, like you dig in, you have that, you don't shy away from that push and that I got this. Like, oh yeah, we're going to take a breath. We're going to do this. I just am. Anyways, I love that. I get goosebumps right now. Or if I get all fired up, I'm like, fuck yes. Fuck yes. I love seeing that, because it's not only is it contagious in that way, yes, you do have this. I fucking know it. And I know it. And everybody knows it. I wish more people knew, like, whatever it is, you got this.
Yeah.
That's anyways, I'm pumped right now.
Yeah.
I'm fired up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, like that, and thank you for that reflection. And also like like you bring that out in me too, like when we're working out and like doing your program and everything, like you get me fired up and want me to push. But that also like that translates into my ability to have really hard, difficult conversations and deal with really hard, difficult things. And I feel like that is what has reinforced this sense of like strength and courage in me that like I don't even know in what's happened over the last 4 years and in the conversations that I've had and in the ways that I've shown up for and stood up for myself and spoken my truth. I look back on those moments and like I don't even know where I got the courage to do that, but I know that I have it in me and now it's just like amplified because I've accessed it and I know that it's there, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I love what you're doing. I love being part of it. I really appreciate you bringing him into your space. And
my pleasure.
Leroy is loving it. Clearly. And I really, thank you for taking the time and sitting down and having this conversation, Shanna.
Thank you. It's great. Thanks for having me.
How can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on Instagram, Glowing Goddess. My handle is at shanna.wilton. And I'm just about to release part 2 of my Healing Sexual Trauma series.
Yeah.
And there's also going to be some other cool ways to work with me coming up. So
I'll link it all in the description and stuff. So it's all right there.
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.